and welcome to Dice Over Everything, the miniatures gaming podcast.
So, you know the phrase, the early bird gets the worm?
Yes, I think a lot of people know that, although maybe young people don't because they're just filled with memes instead.
Okay, that's not one of those. There's no Fruit Ninja game that's like trying to slice the worms apart as the bird.
Yeah, yeah.
So, the thing is, now that Killteam 2021 has come out, there have been lots of other skirmish games out before.
Mm-hmm.
So, we decided we should also give those a try. And
Yeah,
one of
things
the
that
ones
we've been on our radar for a while that we just haven't got around onto the table.
Yep, because they're basically the early birds. So you figure, okay, maybe these have caught some of the worms before GW releases Killteam.
Yep.
So I mean, Killteam 1 died, so presumably all those birds out there should have been killing worms.
Eating.
And you know,
the big nasty birds was died, so there's a lot of worms out there for people to go into, and I think that's true. I think
there's lots more room for worms. Yes.
Wait, lots more room for birds, right?
Yeah, because
the birds are the games.
Yeah, and the giant
worms are the players, right? The early birds. So it's like the early, in this analogy, the early birds are the games that are picking up the players that want to play and eating them up into their ecosystem. So it's actually good to be a worm in this analogy. You become as one with the game and you become part of them. So
unless the wrong bird gets you, you know.
Well, actually, there's a lot of games that chew you up and then spit you out and then turn you away from all miniature games afterwards. But mostly they're from the Games Workshop space. So we've talked previously about Stargrave, right? Which is the Frostgrave in space, which got some shine. And today we've mentioned this game before, but we finally got around to playing a demo game, so we wanted to talk about it more and give you first impressions about this game that is often talked about, and that game is OnePageRules. Now this is a game that is basically free, and it was started by, I believe, a person that wasn't really fond of the Games Workshop rules. I believe it actually started out for 40K, and then he created a skirmish version because skirmish, started getting quite hot, right? And so the original concept is Warhammer 40,000 is way too complicated. Why don't we create his thinking was, why don't I create like a pared down version so you can just get into playing without having to worry about all these different special rules and all those kind of crazy things. Like, I just want to get the models I just painted onto the table and have a fun game with my friends.
Yeah, and so we didn't play that version because, we're not that big on putting giant armies on the table anymore. But we did play the
too old for that shit.
Yeah, the sci-fi Firefight version.
What's it called? Something Firefight? Is it Grim Future or Dark Future? Grim. We really should have looked this up.
Grim Future Firefight.
In any case, you can find these rules and they're free, which is a huge selling point. Grimdark Future Firefight. Oh, it's GF Firefight. So it's Grimdark Future Firefight.
Yep. So we played once together, and then I played again this morning. Just refresh on the rules.
Yep.
So, to go over sort of how it parallels other games out there, it's definitely in the skirmish space because you're playing between maybe 6 to 12 guys,
something like that. Yeah.
And some of the units can be grouped where they become larger, but we didn't use any of those just to keep it simple.
Yeah.
So it's definitely in the skirmish game space. Yeah. What wasn't so skirmish game about it, though, was the board size it plays on, which, to be fair, Infinity plays on the same board size, which is a 4x.
I think it's a little bit more old school. because if you look at all the old skirmish games, they also played under 4x4, right? It's just people had bigger tables back then. There was more space. I I don't know if that's actually true, but it seems like that relative to like the game players, because who can fit a 4x8 table now in your house these days, right? That's the original size of uh, Warhammer 40,000, and that was a skirmish game. The original like Road Trader and even the beginning of second edition, I guess, was a skirmish game. So apparently that's why, guns have ranges and stuff like that. But yeah, so one page rules. Why would you? So what is the major selling point for one page rules? Why you should try it out, and what is like? Why do they tell you that you should try it out?
So it lets you put, like, the good thing about it is it lets you put like the army you want to put on the board, or at least the little skirmish force you want to put, because it gives you loads of options for like different. It's got your standard sci-fi tropes, which kind of parallel the GW universe.
And more, actually. So this is one of the cool things, is that because they're not actually James Workshop, right? They basically created armies for every single type of army you would want to play. So there's, like you said, parallels for almost every, or even more than, well, every single Games Workshop ones you want to play. There's Battle Brothers, which are, religious zealot, power armored warriors, and then they have Prime Brothers, which are even bigger, stronger versions of those,
and slightly tougher.
Yeah,
not right? Crazy tougher, just a little.
And then you have Custodian Brothers, which are like super buffed, whatever kind of brothers, and all of those parallel things very specific to Games Workshop models. But they also have other things like Vermin, which are space rat men, which are apparently quite popular as an aesthetic, right? Which is not, there's nothing in Games Workshop that has that, but they put that in, right? And I'm sure if you look at it, I assume there's going to be a samurai, what do you call them? Samurai light sword faction too.
Light sword
my
monk.
assumption. I actually didn't look at that.
Monks with light swords.
Yeah, light sword faction. I assume there is an army that has that. I didn't check for sure, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't. So that definitely is a selling point. No matter what kind of science fiction models you have, you can kind of like throw them on the table and play them against your other friend, right? Like you don't have to paint up a specific, let's say if your friend's into Star Wars Legion, a specific army like in the Legion universe. If you like Space Marines, well, why don't you just throw in on Grimdark Future Firefight, and you guys can both use factions, whatever kind of army list matches the most of the aesthetic, and throw them down. So I think that goes along with the second major pillar, is the game is supposed to be easy to play for people who just want to throw down and have fun, right?
Yep. So we're experienced in playing different miniature games. So this one was pretty easy to pick up. I would say we played our first game in about an hour.
Yep. First game in about, yes. Yeah, we took like half an hour like to read the rules. And so we read the rules briefly before, but not in detail. So in playing, we got together, read the rules, built our army list in half an hour, and then played the game out in an hour. So now we're veterans, but like if you're a new player, your first experience might be like, I don't know, really quick, 2.5 hours or something like that. You could probably get that done in a hobby shop if you've never played a miniature game before.
Yep. I'm not sure how the hobby stores would support it, but I guess they can sell anything to you.
Okay, you're right. I guess your hobby store, your hobby store, you still need miniatures, right? So assuming you didn't 3D print your miniatures and then come to the store just to play, right? Or fair, just play it at your friend's place, right? In an afternoon. Go over after work, set it up. If you've only ever played board games, like I think this is a great introductory rule set for new players, as long as you don't use their what do you call it, squad rules. the thing that I was talking about, that you talked about before, how certain units have 5 guys. Assuming you both choose factions that don't have that, the rules are really simple. Like the name of the rule set is One Page Rules. The idea is that all your rules are going to be on one page, front and back. So it's a little bit cheaty, but really it's one page. So how much can you complain, right?
Yeah, and then the rules for the faction are also on one page, front and back, and one of those pages is
Yep.
basically fluff. So
yeah, exactly. So it's like really quick to get to play. It's not super complicated. Great introductory rule set. And even though we're veterans, what did you think about the overall strategy of playing?
So I felt like the factions actually had like good flavor to them.
Mm-hmm. They played differently.
They did feel like they played differently. So that's always a positive thing. You don't want to feel like you're just having a mirror match and just shooting equally across the board. So that was a good plus. Each of the individual units within the army felt pretty specialized as well. So you felt like you had good different tools you could bring to
and different units with real yeah, it felt like a real proper game, even though it was simple. It felt like you're actually getting all of those kind of things that you want.
Yeah, I think
in
it is
terms
one of
of
those.
uniqueness.
Yeah, I think it was more of a beer and pretzels game than a highly competitive game. Because if you knew what faction you were playing against and you decided to like perfectly tailor your army to fight against, like, say, a high armor faction, or say against like a mass,
Or
like a
the other way
mass troop
around.
faction, you could really just like destroy your opponent by taking the perfect army to beat them. So there's got to be like an agreement on what you're playing, because there's no fixed tournament system where you've got to pre-make your lists and you don't know who you're playing. So on that
But
front,
do you think
it's not meant to be super competitive.
that is the same kind of thing with Games Workshop games? And do you feel like the games are relatively the factions are relatively balanced in One Page Rules relative to Games Workshop, more or less? Like,
I
are
think
they more balanced than Games Workshop games or less?
I think they're probably more balanced, because when I was just by reading through the points, in reading through the points in GW games, you'll often see things where it's like, this is clearly terrible, or this is clearly just like way better.
Yeah.
In this, it's like, okay, what you're paying for extra weapons and what your guys cost versus other guys all seems to be sort of in a reasonable range. And they're on a second edition by this point, so I think they've like taken a bunch of feedback probably and tweaked things.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing, like in a game like Killteam or in just the general model of Games Workshop, oftentimes the game is changing so much, and when they release a new codex, they want to release, I don't know, maybe they're just bad at balancing, I don't know. But oftentimes they just release brand new kind of things, and it feels like they didn't really spend the time to refine and test it as much as is actually needed. And of course, in Killteam, they released their compendium of like 16 armies or something like that. And there's no way they actually play tested this very long, because those armies are not balanced against each other.
No, you can read them and clearly see that some things are just amazing to the point costs, and some you would never want to take.
And then when you put that on the table, you're like, oh yeah, it worked out. Like they are kind of super powerful, yeah. And part of the reason is because Killteam is a brand new game with 16 brand new armies. Of course, you're going to expect them not to be balanced against each other, right? But that is a decision that Games Workshop made to do, right? To release those 16 armies on release so that people will play them. It's almost like the people that are playing Killteam right now with the compendium are playtesting these armies. And I think a lot of people said, the actual playtested armies are these 2 factions every 3 months, right? That they're releasing in their deluxe boxes. And those are like the real balanced armies, right? And then the compendium is just like, let's hope it works out.
This will just get the people in who want to see their models on the table, not worry about the game being good long term.
Yeah. Whereas One Page Rules, I don't know for sure, but like there's a lot of edition changes, right? And balancing and tweaking that seems to be going through those army lists.
Yeah, and you can see the army lists. Like even the army lists are on a certain version as well.
Yeah.
So they don't just get left for years. And especially if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
I'm sure they take feedback and have incorporated it.
Yep. And so that is really good. One thing that really helps with that kind of balancing is that the one page rules, all of the main rules are free. This is also maybe what we should have left off with in terms of why should you try one page rules? The rules are free. You can go to look up one page rules on Google. It'll come up, and the main rules for Skirmish Fight. So the one with the 2 pages is free, which is, and then they have a more like detailed uh, rules book for if you've never played a miniature game before, right? Which I think 16 pages. So it's not like super long either, right? But it'll go through the like handhold you through how to play. That's free. All of the army lists that we just talked about, they're all free. You go on the website, you can play this, and so you can try it out, see how you like it, right? And because it's free, though, if there's an army that is too strong, like Battle Brothers, everything is a PDF, right? So if the Battle Brothers sheet that you downloaded, let's say their main gun is too strong, then they can tweak that and release that for free online, and you get an update immediately, right? Whereas if you're using the old print model, like even some of my favorite games are print, like Frostgrave, it's a lot harder for them to update that book, right? If there's something that is overpowered, because it's printed. They can't just send out a free printed version of the book, which is it's the thing that you take, right?
Yeah, and by the end of Frostgrave first edition, there was like several layers of books that would incorporate different rules from each book in order to play like the ideal version of Frostgrave. So it's
exactly, like they had errata books, right? For two, or I think there were like two. Basically, it all came out in 2 different books, but still, those are 2 extra books on top of the main book to modify and in some ways patch the main game to make it the ideal version, right? And they had to basically release a second edition to truly actually have everything more balanced, right? So if everything's online, though, easy to get, easy to tweak these rules, and Frostgrave is a little bit better because the base guys are not as there's not like a whole bunch of like little guys with a certain number of points where they can be broken and you build an army for that, right? It's mostly the spells, and in which case all wizards can technically get all the spells. So it's a lot easier to balance those kind of things against each other, right? But if you're playing an army list game where every army should play different with different armies, and then you're trying to balance all that kind of stuff, that is really hard to do on your first shot, right? And you can see it, especially in Games Workshop stuff. And like we said, Games Workshop is terrible at balancing, but how often they have like day 1 facts for their books they've printed. And then oftentimes after they've had some tournament results, they'll have 1 month facts, which are, they're not just like day 1 facts often have just typos, but 1 month in facts or 1 month in patches will often have balance changes.
Yeah, and you have to go search for all these things, which is always a bit of a nuisance.
And it's especially weird because
especially a big nuisance for newer players because you're not familiar with where they publish all the resources.
Yep. And so it's weird, like in Killteam, why the compendium, considering it's supposed to be a stopgap, it seems like it's supposed to be a stopgap, why they didn't put that for free online.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what One Page Rules does. And I got to tell you, it works and it's great.
Yep.
All right. So
other great things, I think we found that building the armies was actually really smooth and easy, and you could get like you pull your models out, you're like, I kind of want to use these things, and you build something for them and it goes really quickly. And if there's the upgrade abilities are all really simple to understand how you like equip your guys with extra war gear. So that was all very smooth.
Yeah, it was actually surprisingly easy. So you have like 250 points, right? And it seems like a lot of points to calculate, but I believe all the points are in 5-point increments, so it's not actually as many decision points as you would think. And you basically you just choose your army guys, and then they have like a list of different sections of upgrades you can take, and like a captain can take upgrade, like one upgrade from A, B, and C table, and then you just go to that table and you choose one upgrade from those, and you just kind of go through. It was actually really simple. And one of the things that really helps is that the entire army list is on one page, so you're not constantly flipping back and forth.
Yeah, when you've got to tweak one unit for points to give points to another unit, you're not flipping back through the book. You just stay on that page and pick everything you need and adjust right there. So that was really.
And of course, if they had an army builder, it would be even easier. But honestly, it was so easy with that one page. You honestly don't need it, right? So,
no, the armies are small, so it's, and you're, as you said, you're only working with 5-point increments, so you're not doing very complicated math up to 250.
Yeah, so I honestly found this easier to build than building my Killteam armies. Yeah, even though Killteam army,
despite the fact that your war gear is limited to a couple points, specific amount of points in Killteam, so you think it would be really easy, but
they say you have to take 7 units from this list. But I don't even like the list, the page that says take 7 of these guys, right, or whatever number, right? Does not have all the stats of those guys. So I have no idea what those guys do. So I'm like flicking back and forth, right? So saying, okay, what does this unit do? Okay. And then I flip back to the main page. Oh, I'll choose this guy. And I flip back, and it was honestly longer to build a Killteam army, even though it's supposedly simplified, than it was for OnePageRules. And I understand, like the way that the book is laid out, right, is going to be more decompressed in the Games Workshop game. So even if they did the same kind of point system, it'd be even more complicated in the Games Workshop book. But why couldn't they create just like summary sheets that are similar?
Yep,
they could probably have done a summary sheet that's 2 pages maybe for a Games Workshop one, which means that you have your 2 open pages, and you could look, here are my points and here are my rough stats, and the details could be in the back of the book, right? You could just have the names for the abilities.
Yeah, but you need to look them up to remember if you remember what the ability means, you don't need to look them up, but if you need to refresh yourself, you go back into the full pages.
Yeah,
because like the codexes before, like codexes would often have the back pages with a summary of all the units, but they just didn't do that for Killteam.
They haven't done that in a long time, I don't think. I think if you look at any of those the new codexes, they don't have that, right? I don't know. Maybe they're trying to sell their online army builders and stuff like that, but in terms of just book by the book, like building your army, it's so much easier to do it that way. So
yeah, you don't want an army builder for Killteam either, because like you put your army on the board after you get your deployment zone, so you don't want to be sitting there building an army. You just want to throw your guys right on the table.
Yeah. So so I thought that was really good. So we've talked a lot about like building the game, why you should get into the game, how easy it is. How about the actual gameplay though? This is the thing, like,
so in this game, we'll go back to like the standard GW universe, which everybody's used to, where to kill someone off the board, you've got to roll the hit, then you've got to roll against their toughness, and then they've got to save. So that's kind of what we've gotten used to in a lot of games. But then from what we've seen in other games like Frostgrave, where you roll one roll and that result against each other, that resolves the entire thing. Or you go to Infinity Save, where you roll the hit and then you roll for a save after that. So it's down to 2 rolls. This game is into the space of having 3 rolls as well. But because you're not rolling so many dice usually, it goes pretty quickly because you've got to roll to basically hit. Then your opponent, for every hit you make, then rolls to try and make their saves against those. And then after that, depending on how many hits or basically wounds you've taken off those hits, it starts getting more and more likely your guy will be killed right off the board versus just sort of knocked down and stunned for the rest of the activation. So that part of the guys often being stunned rather than fully taken off, it seems to work pretty well in a skirmish game because you don't have that many guys on the board. So it makes an interesting choice for when you're attacking someone. Do you want to like spend your attacks to either get their whole army inactive by stunning them, Or do you want to start getting stuff off the board so you don't have to worry about it the next
Finishing them
turn?
off, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
it's
getting
quite
them
an
off in
interesting kind of mechanic.
Mhm.
Instead of the toughness roll, like you basically have the stun kind of thing, and everyone is basically just has the one like the same stun kind of track, but it does give people like when I looked at how deadly the guns were, I at first I was like, oh, this looks like it's going to be a really deadly game, but with the
Mhm.
stunning thing, it actually did allow people with a high armor save value to really survive a lot longer than I expected, right? So a good defense value, even though they only have one wound technically, the whole stunning thing means you have to basically lose 2 armor saves for you to actually like in one round to actually die, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's exactly that, but anyhow, I think if you take another hit from reading it this morning, they go
Mm-hmm.
away. Anyhow,
Yeah, that's what I said.
yeah, okay.
Oh, but you have to still fail to save,
I don't believe
don't
so.
you?
No,
The save doesn't work when you're stunned.
no.
Oh, okay,
So it's basically if they can overwhelm you,
okay,
then they can finish you off.
okay. Fair enough. Well, good that you played that second game because that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was really good in general. I know, like, I don't know for some reason people like the 40K games are way too deadly in my opinion. The games that we played, like in a lot of 40K games, they might have they might be like a 4 turn game or whatever, or even a 5 turn game, but oftentimes your game will end on turn 3 because one side was completely killed and wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like in this game it's a little bit more balanced in terms of getting killed and stuff like that and survivability. That you're much less likely to be completely wiped out uh, at the end. Well, at halfway through the game, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense because they do have a retreat rule that if you start losing 50% of your guys, you start losing, like people start just running away and retreating.
Yep.
So
So
yeah.
we played the base mission, which is basically controlling objectives, where there's basically 3 to 6 objectives randomly placed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the other version. There's the 2 further missions, base missions that they show, which have random objectives that are drawn off of cards. Oh, yep.
Yep. Do you want to go through that?
Um, we didn't play. So the base version is basically just how being able to control the objectives with guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Which
it was quite. Yeah, I like the base mission. I thought it was a good base mission, and even though there's like 3 to 6 objectives, I felt like um
it would
you
favor the
would really
larger numbered.
favor larger number guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in Killteam we talked about problems of babysitting objectives, but you
Yep.
actually flip the objectives in OnePageRules in the main mission. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, you touch them, and then well, you activate them, and then they're controlled by you, and the enemy has to come in. Is it by the end of the? It's been too long. It's only been a couple weeks, but it's
Uh-huh.
been too long. Is it like at the very end of the round, if you control it, it flips to you?
Yep.
Yeah. So you don't have to stand next to it every round. Like once it's flipped to you, it stays flipped to you, and then at the end of the game, if more of them are flipped to you, then you win, which allows like elite armies to basically flip it and then move past it, right, and continue attacking, as opposed to the terrible missions in Killteam where you have to babysit the objectives, which means that if you have an elite army of 5 guys versus your opponent who has 12 guys, you're at a huge disadvantage because you have to have 3 guys babysitting the objective. They can't move up and fight. Whereas when you're just flipping them, you just flip them one round and then you're back into the fight as long as the enemy can't like get around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The objective is safe. So
Yeah. So in this game, though, your standard guys can move 6 and run 12, but you can't run
mm-hmm.
right past guys too close. You can't move within more than an inch without entering into combat,
Yeah.
which it works pretty well for stopping guys from, as we said, just running past yours to the objectives. And the only time you can come in is to charge. The one sort of thing I found this game did differently than a lot of others with the melee is that once you're finished fighting in melee, that your models actually disengage if they're still alive afterwards.
Yeah, so you
Which
can't
then
lock someone in melee.
Yeah, which also means though that both models that just went into melee can start getting shot by people from outside, which most games don't do. And honestly, it seemed to work fine because you don't have so many guys on the board to mow them down with. So
Yep. Yeah, and again, this is like a shooting game, so it makes sense if you get, shooting is strong, right? Like a science fiction game, generally guns should be stronger, right? Although technically, if it was a fantasy or like a historical game, it's fine also to bounce up because there's not going to be that many shooting guys either. So then it's just the opposite, right?
yeah, as long as the army building restricts the number of shooting guys you can take, then it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so it seemed to work out pretty well.
Yep.
And kept things relatively simple, right? There's not the yeah.
And
Was there
in
any
terms of,
kind of things that felt like the game was, like we said, this game is supposed to be simple, right? Simple, easy to get into, and you just, if you're the kind of person that just wanted to paint up a model and throw that thing on the table against your friend and have a couple laughs, right? Was there any issues that you felt like, oh man, this is a little bit fiddly or complicated, or why did they do this in the main rule set?
no, nothing felt fiddly. I think my biggest beef, I don't know how much more time we have to get into this though, is obviously this is a simple game and we're gamers that lean more towards like deeper war games. And in this game, basically everything is set on the table at the start of the game. Like you can see your opponent's abilities, you can see where all their guys most there, except you can do some deployment shenanigans. But after after the game gets going, you basically know what assets are fighting which assets and what you're fighting for. So there's less sort of having anything up your sleeve. There's less trying to manage like resources.
Hidden knowledge, yeah.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, hidden knowledge and also resources, yeah. Not as much once the game actually gets going, right? All of those kind of things are calculated beforehand in points of guys. So your buffs that you give your leader will often have like an aura which buffs everyone around them, which is kind of like a superpower, right? But your ability to keep that buff up is based on not your leader not dying, right? And there's a couple of things, like sometimes they have to activate to actually activate it, but I kind of agree. There's not as much, not as many moving parts once you get on the table, but it's like, I think the game like is, it gets all of the pieces, right? It's just a little bit, there's just, I guess there is actually movement and stuff like that. So maybe it's just the amount of detail and complication in terms of moving parts that you want while you're playing. And like you said, the resources that you can kind of make decision points more than just moving your guys and shooting and activation order. It's a little bit fun to do, especially for us when we played so many games. And I think the big thing is hidden information, which we've talked about a lot. Like once we started playing games with hidden information, i.e. Infinity, and also Frostgrave with the hidden objectives, it's very hard to go back to a game, in my opinion, without any of that, right?
Yeah, it starts to feel flat. It's just like, oh, I can see what's going to happen next turn.
Yeah.
What's happening here? The excitement can. There's less tension and less.
You don't get any of the
there's less
the surprise things, right? The poker kind of face where you're staring down your opponent and you're like, what do you actually have? What's up your sleeve, right? And it's actually gotten really popular with ability cards, right? Like Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones, sort of Song of Ice and Fire has ability cards. The War Machine Skirmish, which kind of died, but Company of Iron, I think it's called, also had ability cards, which I actually like better than their Warcaster kind of spell list in many ways. Also had ability cards. So these things are like all over the place in modern games, right?
Yeah, and just in terms
of the games that we've designed, we always put a little bit of that stuff in just because it's super fun, right? Yeah. We had in our space game Secret Weapons, in our current one, which is a science fiction kind of skirmish, and our fantasy one, we have ability cards, right? Hidden abilities, right? So yeah, it adds a lot of like next leveling kind of thing that for pretty cheap, right? You don't actually, it's not that complicated of a rule to have these hidden kind of abilities,
Yeah,
considering how much they add to the game.
yeah, there's more ways of planning. Like you can just plan more interesting maneuvers when you've got just more going on than just models on the board. Because having more models on the board just makes the game fiddly and slower. But having that second level of resources you're managing just makes it more interesting.
And it maps onto like things that people actually would have in a skirmish kind of setting, right? Especially in media and action movies and things like that, right? You have special tactics, or you have secretly set up, let's say, a trap here, right? And something that your opponent didn't know, right? And that kind of mechanic is like often a very important part of, let's say, our action movie media, right? Or action TV show media, where it's not just a straight up, Rochambeau Optimus Prime versus Megatron and they're just punching each other, right? It's oh well, I'm secretly gonna ambush you with, I don't know, the Dinobots or some shit. I don't think it actually matters on the Transformers because I'm not sure how often that happened.
Yeah, but when it does happen, it's epic. So
yes, exactly. It's so much more epic than it just Optimus Prime shows up and just always punches Megatron better than Megatron's able to punch Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
So, yep. So that is one thing that it would be nice if they had. I think they even in their missions, like a Killteam has secret missions, which is very fun, right? It's the same kind of idea.
Yep.
But the thing that even though OnePageRules has the changing missions for the advanced, the two other advanced missions where like they kind of come up, they're not really hidden, right?
No, you don't know. You don't necessarily. You don't know what they are from the beginning of the game because they can revolve. You get them. You get new ones. So when you go into the game, you don't know what you're trying to go after, and you can try and hide it from your opponent, which is really entertaining. It's like, oh, what is he actually trying to do? It's like
in Killteam.
Yeah, in Killteam, they can just think, oh, are you just being crazy going over here, or are you really just trying to take the whole game and I have to come stop you?
Yeah, and I think we played a Frostgrave mission where I was about to like kill all your guys who are huddled around one of your one like secret objective that I thought was just small, right? I was like, why are you clumping all of your guys around this objective, right? And we're playing.
Why have you taken the treasure to the middle of the table? You're supposed to take it off.
Yes, exactly.
What is wrong with you?
Exactly. Like, why are these guys just clumped here, right? And we're playing for, what's it called? What's the expansion with the hidden objectives?
The ulterior motives.
Yeah, ulterior motives, right? So in ulterior motives, you place like 3 or 4 different little objectives around the table, and most of them don't do anything, right? But then some of them will give you extra experience or do things like that, right? So I was like, oh, you must have clumped all these guys here because I had a guy there as well. And I thought you were just clumping them there to like fight. And then suddenly, actually, you moved immediately to like this one of your objectives and teleported away. And right before I threw a fireball and killed all of them.
Yep.
And it just felt great, right? To have that kind of hidden thing going on, right?
It's like turn one, and it looked like it made no sense. It was going pretty badly, but until it finally went off.
Yeah, and then you teleported off. So whereas OnePageRules, they don't have any of that hidden information, right? Even the random objectives, as soon as you get a random objective, you show it to your opponent, right? And obviously, like, because they have this, right? It's obvious that these objectives are supposed to be open, and it's like a design choice from OnePageRules not to add any secret information, right? Right? Some people don't like it, right? Just in our opinion, we love it, and we think it adds so much to the game, right? It's like you're adding that kind of poker-esque kind of mechanic where you don't know what the guy's you have to second guess yourself, right?
Yep. So we're basically saying the game we would create in a similar space would be more complicated. Like the level of rules per model would likely be around the same, Possibly with simpler weapons, just to keep the
Actually,
complexity
possibly
down.
simpler. Yeah. What do we say possibly? We have actually created a game that's simpler,
Okay.
right? So we have Blood of Stars. This is a game. I think we've mentioned it before, right? A skirmish game. Maybe we haven't. No, I think we have. so so it's simpler, right? The every unit guy's abilities are simpler, but we do have these extra layers of abilities, right? These things like hidden cards and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So I think we personally think that the direction of adding the complexity,
Mhm.
like keeping the same level of complexity so people can pick it up, play quickly, like learn it quickly and play it quickly, but putting the depth of the game somewhere else would make for more interesting gameplay. So
Yeah. So that's I think a major missing thing. I think the one major mechanic thing, like I think most of the mechanics are great. There's a couple of things that I didn't understand is that so whenever you activate, you activate using one of four different actions. One of the actions is like move and shoot, and another action is don't move and shoot. So move 0 and shoot. And I'm like,
yeah, it's called hold, but why?
but
Maybe
we
it
couldn't find
falls.
any rules where hold is the same. It seemed like the exact same thing as move and shoot, except that you move 0.
Yeah, unless it comes up in some of those objective cards where you have to hold and then kill something by shooting. That's the only way I can
Yeah.
see it hiding in there. But
But it seemed like an extra extraneous rule that you didn't need, right?
mhm.
If you just said your move it's already is move up to
or,
6 inches and then shoot.
or some of the armies or some of the army lists we didn't read could have had abilities where if you hold and shoot, you gain good shot or something, basically improving the quality of your shooting. It
Yeah.
could be in some niche spots.
But I feel like if you have special rules, you can just say move 0, then get this ability. If you move 0, you get this ability. I don't know. That was one thing that I didn't understand. And then the other one was the group mechanic. There's a lot of rules for how a group of models activates together, right, as a unit.
Mhm.
And considering this is a skirmish game and most armies don't have it, I don't think they needed it. I think they could have removed that rule entirely.
Yeah, and the thing is, we intend to include a similar rule, but hopefully, how we've arranged it is simpler. So,
Yeah, just so that some armies can have lots more guys on the table.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that part, like again, because the game is supposed to be simple, that's not. I don't think that is needed for the game. I don't think it adds much to the game, honestly, especially for how much you're paying for it in terms of complexity.
Yeah.
Yep. So um, that's not very many negatives. So I think one we kind of touched on, which is kind of not an actual negative in terms of design, but might be a negative for you as a person, is we said this game is super simple, easy to play when you start up. Is there a problem of it being possibly too simple?
Well, yeah, as I said before, I think once you figure out how the game goes, just that the game length is fairly short and the guys only activate once. So the amount of like potential maneuvering you can do once I think you figured out how you play the game, I think it might start to feel like it runs on rails for any experienced war gamer. So you don't feel like you're making important decisions. You're just kind of carrying out
You
tasks
might
as
figure out you might have figured out the game too quickly, right?
yeah.
And then the fun is mostly just the beer and pretzels, kind of seeing how things go, and
Just seeing how the
possibly if you
rules
pick up a
go.
new
Yeah.
army, right? Because every new army you're going to have to learn what works and what doesn't, right?
Yeah, and
So
you can take
if you're not just jumping from army to army, then and you just have, let's say, your space marines, you just want to play your space marines, it might start feeling a little bit more stale.
yeah, if you constantly put new units in, you can switch it up. But
Mhm. But if it's the same one, you might get it might become dry a little bit faster than other games. Like every game becomes dry if it's the same thing over and over again, but it's just how long does it take?
yeah, and how much variation can you create, or how much? Mhm. And the game doesn't
Mhm.
let you create that much variation. So
Yeah, and I think one of the major issues is the missions.
mhm.
There's only one main mission, even though it's a very good mission. Uh,
Oh, the other two are there easily to use.
yeah, but at the same time, like the variety missions, the second and third mission feel a little bit more random
Yep.
and less narrative
Very,
than the first mission.
they're
The
very
first
game.
mission, yeah, exactly. It feels very gamey, right? You're picking random things. Why is your why is your objective suddenly changing, right? So if your first objective is, oh, go to the end of your enemy's deployment zone, and then your second objective that you pick up, because you're constantly getting new objectives in the second and third one, is, oh, go back to your main your deployment zone, and you're like, does this make sense? Like, it's
Yeah. And I'm worried in that form of the game that having more troops than your opponent would be really beneficial for achieving the objectives. Just
more
because
beneficial, yeah.
you're occupying more space that you can do. Well, you basically have more access to different locations at
Yeah, more
once.
actions. You have more
Mhm.
actions to touch more things. Yep,
Yep.
possible. So I feel like I wish they would have had more main missions, just more like relatively balanced missions in the mission pack than just one. Like, it's great to have one mission on your one page rules, but if they had like another, I don't know, another one page of other
Well,
missions, that would have been nice.
well, I think if you want to support them and buy some of the things they offer, they sell more missions. So
Oh, do they? Oh,
those
okay,
are
that's
really
good.
out there for people.
Yeah, so they do. That's the last thing. Is they do have, I guess there's two things, right? Um, they do have a Patreon. So like we said, it's free, right? But it's not, there's a lot of work that went into this rule system, right? They have their
Mhm.
rules, and then they have these updating army lists, right? And all of this is free. And literally, we just talked about the skirmish fight version. There's like 4 other rule sets: one for 40k proper, one for fantasy, and one for fantasy skirmish. Right? They're all based around the same rule set, but like modified so you can play that with all army lists, right? So if you end up playing this and you end up really enjoying it, they do have a Patreon, which is you can throw them a few bucks, right? Just to show your appreciation. And they do sweeten the deal because their Patreon also gives 3D free, not free, Patreon paid 3D printed designs for if you have a 3D printer, right? So
Mhm.
you can, if you don't have, let's say, a Sisters of Battle army, I believe they just released a science fiction nuns army. I think that's the last time I looked, but I think they're probably on a new one now, right? So, so they're, it's become kind of a business, right? Where these person, they put in a lot of effort and they made they're through public funding of the people that play their game. You can throw them bucks however much you think it's worth, which I think is great.
Mhm.
The last thing is, uh, how about you personally? Who do you think, after we talked about it a lot, I think we talked about the fact that it's great for beginners. Who would you say is the main target for this game, and who would you say are the people that maybe you would avoid this game or not play it that much, right? So, what is the
Yes.
target?
Oh, I think it's very, very casual gaming people who just like having model collections
Mm-hmm.
and then playing with beer and pretzel style with their friends. They don't, it's not going to appeal to people who really want to like learn the tech behind all the armies. It's not going to all the people who want to like not, don't want to refer to it as min max, but they
But
really
min
want,
max.
it's kind of min max basically. If you want to do that, it's probably not the game that you should be trying to like fiddle with in that way. It's just, I think it's just for people who have model collections that don't fit into any specific location and they just want to play some games with their friends casually.
Yeah, I would say not just that. I'd say if you play Games Workshop games, Skirmish, and
Mhm.
you want a simple game that you can just throw on your newly painted stuff. So if you're primarily like a hobby gamer, as in like it's the entire hobby and maybe even more focused on the models and getting them on the table and having them fight and create a narrative while they fight, I think this game is great for you, right? As well, if you're a beginner into the hobby and you're just trying to tip your dough in, I think this game is right up your alley. It's a great intro game. And you can play it fast. You can get multiple games in. I believe there's also a campaign rule set, which is like, it's not super complicated, but it's enough to kind of feel like your army is growing and getting better. Um, so to me, this is the kind of person you'd want to go to go and play this game. But if you are a more deeper strategy gamer, as in one of the main reasons you play is for getting strategy on the tabletop, right? And feeling like learning how to outsmart your opponent. Like you said, this is more of a beer and pretzels game, right? Even though the game is technically more balanced than Games Workshop games, there's a lot of like cunning strategy you could do in Games Workshop games that you might feel rewards you more, right? We did say that Killteam is a lot more complicated game, and because there's a lot of complicated corners, you can kind of feel like you're learning, getting better at the game. Whereas One Page Rules feels a lot more, you kind of more peak at how you play your army a lot faster. Yeah. And it's not that there's no strategy, it's just that the depth of strategy is a lot lower, right?
Yep, there's just less variety of what you can do, so there's less depth of strategy, which is
fine, right? People. Like, I know a lot of people find Infinity, which is, you know, one of our favorite games, which is super deep strategy, almost like the deepest in terms of gameplay on the tabletop that I've played, that I've basically played for a skirmish game. A lot of people find it too deep, right? A lot of Games Workshop players are like, this game is too complicated and it requires too much strategy on the tabletop. I just want like to throw dice on the table and shoot, right?
Even if they only play Infinity for an hour and a half and they're not like experienced and they're not the type of person who's probably going to be into it, they're like, my head hurts after an hour and a half. I can't play another game.
Yeah. So, you know, like, it's totally understandable, right? And for if Infinity is too complicated, way too complicated of game for you, then try Games Workshop games. If you're like, oh, I don't even want to use this much strategy, then try One Page Rules. I think it's great. And of course, it's still a strategy, right? I'm just saying like the level, right? I'd say Games Workshop games are generally in between. One Page Rules is on the simpler side, and I think Infinity is on the top side. So yeah, and honestly, I think the number of people that are like this are huge. And I think a lot of the people that play Games Workshop games actually would prefer One Page Rules, honestly. Because a lot of the people that play Games Workshop games, it's the hobby that they care about. The models, the miniatures, they want to feel like their model, that to put their models on the table so they can just have some fun with the new guys they painted. That's a huge, probably the majority of people, honestly.
Yeah, and the new restricted army lists that Killteam wants, that I guess they figure will make it more of a competitive game, will push those players away, because now you're building the army GW wants you to build, not so much the army you want to build. So
yeah, and I feel exactly, whereas One Page Rules allows you a lot more customization. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like most people should be playing One Page Rules as opposed to Games Workshop. That said, would you rather play? Okay, we obviously would play Infinity more because, you know, that we already mentioned that the models are, but the models are amazing and the strategy is deep. But would you rather play One Page Rules or Killteam?
I would rather play Killteam, and for two main reasons. One is just the fact that there is some hidden actions possible, like some hidden motive for how you score points.
Because you have hidden secondary objectives.
Yeah, and they're actually worth quite a few points. And number two is the board size. That playing this style of game on this big of a board just doesn't feel right to me.
That is true. The board size is maybe the biggest thing that I don't like about that One Page Rules, because you have to play on something similar to actually get, because all of the rules are balanced around a 4x4 table, right? So you can't shrink it down as easily. I think you could probably shrink it down to a 4x3 and it would work fine, right? Playing it like wide, right? So the 3, you're closer, because they have 12-inch deployment zones and you can just shrink that to 6 inches and it's probably not going to take much out of the game. But that's the minimum, right? You can't shrink it down to a 3x3. It's not going to work.
No, the armies are built like, you pay a lot of points to get more range on your weapons in One Page Rules. So if you take away the space on the board, those guys who you paid all those points for don't make any sense anymore.
Yeah. So in some ways, 3x4 is probably fine. That means that you could probably play it on your kitchen table. But if you were to go to like if you have a smaller table, let's say you have your patio, now we're in the middle of COVID, so a lot of people are playing outside. A lot of people, I play outside. And just setting up a 4x4 is so much more painful, right, than a 3x3, and that made it harder to play, right? Whereas Killteam, super easy, 22x30, that's brilliant. And so I agree.
And the amount of terrain you need to fill the board to have a good board is it's very viable. You can have really nice terrain in Killteam, whereas in this game you've got to like put a lot of time and a lot of material into
terrain
building up the board.
True. That's true. Actually, the terrain thing, we didn't really mention that much, but it's true. Like 4x4s is just harder to play, right? And the amount of terrain and everything that you need to put on the table. So I agree. Killteam, those are two huge things. The hidden objectives for me, is not as big of a deal. So if it were just by the main rules, because I already play super complicated games, I actually like beer and pretzel games outside of that. I would have probably preferred OnePageRules, but you're right. The size of setting up the table probably means that if the 3x4, like we haven't tried 3x4, right? But if that doesn't really work, I would probably end up playing Killteam more just because of the setup of the tables, which is kind of funny.
Yep.
All right. So that is our breakdown of OnePageRules. I think the rule sets are great. I think if you have your 4x4 table or your 3x4 table set up, I think I would thoroughly recommend you at least try OnePageRules. And I think if you're the majority of people, you probably end up liking it a lot. If
you consider yourself a casual gamer and you don't intend to like pour loads of time into like learning all the stats and like learning all the tech behind every armies, then this is probably like right down your alley.
Yeah, if you're a hobbyist first and a gamer, and a war gamer second, right? Then I'd say definitely pick this up or try it out. And if you're a hobbyist, then you'll probably be more likely to have a full 4x4 table of terrain set up because that's part of the hobby. So maybe this is right up your alley. So that is our review of, or I guess, first impressions of OnePageRules. If you have any thoughts about OnePageRules, specifically, I guess the one we talked about was Grimdark Future Firefight, give us a shout. You can find us at Dice Over Everything on Facebook, or you can contact us by email at contact@diceovereverything.com.
Yeah, I would like to know what you thought of the game, or if there's any other sci-fi skirmish games we should add to the list to try to see how you would create the perfect sci-fi skirmish game.
Yeah, and then we will take the best DNA and shove that into our game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To achieve its final.
Yes. Not biased at all. All right. This has been Alan.
It's been Brandon.
Bye.